My name is Laura Mitchell, 46 years old, and I'm a paralegal at a bustling downtown law firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Life for me was a careful balance of professional responsibilities and family obligations. Yet, after the near-death experience that brought me face to face with Jesus, this carefully constructed vision of life would soon be reshaped forever. Not just for me, but for my entire family. Tom, my husband of 20 years, works tirelessly as a contractor, his hands as familiar with blueprints as they are with fixing the leaky faucet in our kitchen. He's the kind of man who'd give you the shirt off his back, but often loses track of time in his work. Then there's Emma, our 17-year-old, who dreams of studying environmental science and spends her evenings balancing schoolwork with shifts at the local coffee shop. Jake, our 14-year-old, is a whirlwind of energy, always darting between soccer practice and his friends' houses. As for me, my focus on a daily basis revolved around striking a balance between my work deadlines and family obligations. From drafting legal documents to organizing soccer practices and helping Emma with her college applications, every day felt like a delicate juggling act. Finding time to check in with Tom and the kids amidst it all was both a challenge and a necessity. Our days were often dictated by schedules, and though faith was always present, it had faded to the background of our busy lives. We attended church only during occasional events like Christmas or Easter. Faith wasn't a central focus for any of us, really, as life often felt too busy to pause and reflect. Our two teen Emma and Jake followed suit, caught up in their own activities. As for me, I often felt a quiet guilt for letting my connection to God drift further away with each passing year. I knew that some effort should be made to rekindle my faith, but in the rush of daily life, I found it easier to brush those thoughts aside and focus on the immediate demands in front of me. But what I would soon experience would upend that dynamic entirely, forcing me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about life, faith, and what truly matters. It was 7:30 a.m. on an ordinary Monday morning, and like any other day, I found myself standing in the kitchen, sipping my coffee while scrolling through emails on my phone. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but my mind was already consumed by the endless to-do list waiting for me. Before he left the house, Tom gave me a quick kiss on the cheek as he grabbed his toolbox and rushed out the door, calling a quick goodbye over his shoulder. "You sure you'll be okay balancing everything today?" he asked, pausing briefly with a concerned look. "I'll manage," I replied with a reassuring smile, though we both knew it would be another hectic day. "Don't forget to lock the door, Tom," I called after him, shaking my head with a small smile. He paused just long enough to give a playful wave before disappearing down the driveway. Then Emma, already running late, snatched a piece of toast and disappeared with a wave, while Jake barely looked up from his phone as he mumbled a distracted, "See ya, Mom." Looking back, it could have been the last time I ever saw them, a thought that still sends a chill down my spine. By the time the clock struck 8:45 a.m., I grabbed my travel mug and headed out the door, my briefcase in hand. Lucky for me, my office was only a short walk from home, so I often enjoyed the fresh air and the chance to clear my head during the commute. The streets were alive with the usual hum of city life, cars honking, neighbors chatting, and the faint echo of a distant construction site. And it was within that seemingly ordinary routine that everything took a turn. I was crossing the street near the park, not bothering to check the pedestrian light, my mind wandering to the day ahead, when the sharp screech of tires jolted me back to reality. It was like the world slowed down for a heartbeat, just enough for me to see the car hurtling toward me and the driver's wide, panicked eyes. I couldn't move, rooted to the spot, as if my feet were cemented to the ground. The impact hit like a sledgehammer, knocking every ounce of breath from my lungs and sending me sprawling across the pavement. The pain was immediate and all-encompassing, a white-hot flash that seemed to radiate from every nerve in my body. The last thing I remember was catching a fleeting glimpse of the car speeding away, its taillights fading into the distance as a muffled scream echoed in my ears. That sound, along with the eerie silence that followed, lingered as the world around me started to get blurry. But in those final moments, my thoughts weren't on the car or its driver. They were filled with vivid images of my family's smiling faces, as if they were standing right there in front of me, grounding me in a fleeting moment of peace. "I love you," I said in my head. Then everything went dark. Later that day, Tom told me the doctor said my heart had stopped beating for 7 minutes and 12 seconds. Those numbers seemed so small, yet what I experienced during that time felt like an eternity, as if time itself had unraveled. And within that eternity, my journey began, a journey into the unknown, where every step would challenge everything I thought I understood about life and the dark reality humanity is currently facing. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear where in the world you're listening from. It's always heartwarming to know we're connected, no matter how far apart we may be. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the light. It wasn't like any light I had ever seen before. It was warm, golden, and seemed to pulse with life, as though it were breathing alongside me. I felt as though I were floating, my body weightless and free from the pain that had just consumed me. My thoughts scrambled to make sense of where I was, but no answer came. Instead, I was filled with a profound sense of peace, one so deep, it was as though all the fears and burdens of my earthly life had been lifted away. The next thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't empty or hollow, it was full, rich, and alive. It was as though the silence itself was a presence, one that wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. In that silence, I began to feel an overwhelming awareness of something or someone. And then I heard his voice. It wasn't loud, yet it resonated through every fiber of my being, filling me with a love so pure that it was almost unbearable. "Laura," the voice said, and with just the sound of my name, I felt seen in a way I never had before. Tears welled up in my eyes, and though I didn't understand why, I knew who was speaking to me. "Jesus," I whispered, my voice trembling. As the word left my lips, the golden light around me began to shift, taking on form and substance until he was there, standing before me. His presence was overwhelming, yet gentle, like a tidal wave that had no intention of harming me. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw something I could barely comprehend, a love so vast, so unconditional, that it felt as though the universe itself had been folded into that single gaze. "You have questions," he said, and though it wasn't a question, I nodded. I wanted to speak, to ask where I was, why I was there, what had happened to me. But the words wouldn't come. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that felt like it could heal every wound in my soul. "Be still," he said gently. "You are safe." As he spoke, the golden light began to expand, revealing a landscape that was both foreign and familiar. Rolling hills bathed in light stretched out before me, and the air itself seemed to hum with life. I looked down and realized that I was standing, though I couldn't feel the ground beneath my feet. Everything felt real, yet not real, as though I were in a place where reality itself had been reshaped. "Why am I here?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely more than a whisper. His expression softened, and he took a step closer. "You are here because you need to see," he said. "There is much I need to show you." The hint of what would come next hung in the air, unspoken but deeply felt. I knew that whatever lay ahead would change me forever. "See what?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady as I tried to comprehend where I was and why Jesus was standing in front of me. My mind raced with images of my family, my life, and the mundane worries I carried with me just hours ago. Or perhaps lifetimes ago. "You will understand soon," he said gently, gesturing for me to follow him. As he moved, the golden light surrounding us shifted again, morphing into new shapes and colors that seemed to tell a story I couldn't yet grasp. I hesitated, glancing back at the shimmering hills that now stretched far behind me. "My family," I blurted out. "Are they okay? Do they know what happened to me?" My voice cracked, and tears pricked the corners of my eyes. "They are safe," Jesus said, his voice filled with a tenderness that seemed to wrap around my breaking heart. "Let me show you," Jesus said, gesturing with his hand. As the golden light shifted, scenes began to unfold around us. I saw Tom driving, his knuckles white as they gripped the steering wheel. He had just received the call about my accident, and his mind was a storm of worry and fear. Though he was rushing to the hospital, his thoughts kept drifting to our last interaction that morning, hoping he hadn't missed any signs, hoping it wasn't too late. Emma appeared next, sitting at her desk in school, her pencil tapping rhythmically against her notebook as she worked through a math problem. Her focus was unwavering, the way it always was when she immersed herself in her studies. Then there was Jake, out on the soccer field, kicking a ball back and forth with his teammates. He was laughing, carefree, his world still intact. In his heart, I was just at work, as I always was on a Monday. "They are carrying you in their hearts," Jesus said softly. "Your love has left a mark on them, Laura. It strengthens them, even in this moment of uncertainty." I nodded, the weight of his words settling over me, but another question pushed itself forward. "Why me? Why am I here? I mean, I wasn't prepared for this." Jesus stopped and turned to face me. "No one ever truly is," he said gently. "But you are here because there is something you must see, something you must understand. And," he added, his gaze softening further, "because you have not been honest with yourself about your faith." The words hit me harder than I expected. I froze, feeling the air grow heavier around me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You carry guilt," he said simply. "For years, you have buried your faith beneath the weight of busyness and routine. You've let your connection to God fade, convincing yourself there would always be time to fix it later." His words cut deep, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. Tears welled up in my eyes as memories surfaced, skipping prayers, choosing sleep over Sunday mornings, rushing past moments to reflect because they felt inconvenient. "I wanted to do better," I admitted, my voice breaking. I didn't know how to start." "Faith is not about perfection," Jesus said, his voice kind yet firm. "It is about seeking, even in your imperfection. But there is more to see." As we walked, the landscape began to transform. The hills melted into fields of light, and the sky above us seemed to ripple with colors I couldn't name. It was as if creation itself was alive, singing a song I could almost hear but couldn't quite understand. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "This is the edge of eternity," Jesus said. "A place where what was and what will be converge. It is where truth resides." The weight of his words pressed down on me, and I found myself unable to speak. Instead, I simply followed him, each step bringing new wonders into view. We passed rivers of light that seemed to flow upward, and trees that shimmered with leaves like liquid gold. The air itself seemed to hum with a melody that resonated deep within my soul. "Laura," Jesus said, breaking the silence, "what do you see?" "I don't know," I admitted. It's beautiful, but it's overwhelming. It feels like everything is alive." "That is because it is," he said. "This is creation as it was meant to be, unmarred by pain, fear, or doubt. But there is more you must see." He led me to a place where the light dimmed slightly, and in its stead, images began to form in the air around us. I saw people, thousands of them, moving through their lives. Some were laughing, others were crying, and some looked lost, wandering as though searching for something they couldn't name. "Who are they?" I asked, my heart aching as I watched them. "They are humanity," Jesus said. "They are your brothers and sisters, each one carrying their own burdens, their own hopes, their own fears. And yet many of them are blind to the truth." "What truth?" I asked, my voice trembling. "That they are loved," he said simply. "That they are not alone even when they feel abandoned. That they are called to something greater than what they see before them." Tears streamed down my face as his words sank in. "But why don't they know? Why can't they see it?" "That is why you are here, Laura," he said, "to see what they cannot, so that you may carry it back to them." The images faded and the light around us grew brighter again. I felt a deep sense of purpose stirring within me, but also a weight of responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready for. "Will I be able to do it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "You will not be alone," Jesus said, his eyes meeting mine. "You will have what you need, when you need it. Trust in that." As his words settled over me, the landscape around us began to shift once more, hinting at a new destination. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew that it would change everything, and so, with each step, I felt myself being drawn deeper into the heart of this journey, knowing that the most profound truths were still waiting to be revealed. Jesus stopped walking and gestured for me to sit with him on a small rise overlooking a luminous field. The light seemed to pulse like a living heartbeat, each wave of illumination washing over me and settling into my very being. As I lowered myself to sit, I felt a mix of emotions, curiosity, awe, and a hint of trepidation surge through me, as though the rise itself had been waiting for this moment. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the surreal beauty around me, but deep within, I sensed that something profound was about to be revealed. The light seemed to dance in waves, moving to a rhythm I couldn't hear. He turned to me, his expression more serious now. "Laura, there is something I must show you." His tone sent a chill through me, though not from fear. It was the kind of heaviness that accompanied the weight of truth. I swallowed hard, the air feeling thick around me. "What is it?" I asked. Jesus reached out and the light shifted again. Before us appeared a vision that felt both real and surreal. It was as if the fabric of reality had been stretched thin, revealing glimpses of a hidden truth beneath its surface. The colors were more vivid than anything I had ever seen, each one pulsating with an energy that seemed to breathe life into the scene. My chest tightened as I took it all in, feeling both awe and a deep sense of foreboding. Every detail seemed infused with meaning, yet its full significance remained just out of reach, like a melody I could hear but not fully understand. A sea of people moved through their daily lives, but something was different. Many bore a mark, faint but unmistakable, on their hands or foreheads. The marks shimmered like a hidden thread woven into their very being, yet they carried an unease, a hollowness in their eyes that made my heart ache. "What are those marks?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It felt as though the words caught in my throat, weighted with dread. Jesus' gaze held mine, unwavering. "They are the mark of deception," he said, his voice steady, but tinged with sorrow. It clings to them like an invisible shroud, entwined with their fears and desires. It promises security and belonging, but drains their souls of truth and light. It is a lie they carry, unaware of its weight, believing it to be a shield when it is truly a chain. A false identity imposed upon them, binding them to a lie that they believe to be truth. My stomach churned, the vision before me too vivid to ignore. Why would they take it? Can they not see what it does to them? Many cannot, he replied, his voice tinged with sorrow. The mark appeals to their deepest fears and desires, offering a false sense of security, power, and belonging. But it costs them more than they realize. The weight of his words pressed into me, and I struggled to process what I was seeing. Is this what you meant by showing me what I must understand? Jesus nodded. It is part of it. There is more you must see and more you must carry back with you. As we watched, the scene shifted again. I saw people resisting, their eyes alight with a clarity and strength that seemed to come from within. They bore no marks, but their journey was fraught with hardship and struggle. Despite their trials, they radiated a peace and purpose absent in those marked. They have chosen truth, Jesus said, and it has set them free. Tears welled in my eyes as the scene played out before me. I could feel their resilience, their faith, and the hope that burned like a flame within them. They're so brave, I whispered. They understand what is at stake, Jesus replied, but not all will choose as they have. The vision shifted again, this time focusing on the people with the marks. My heart sank as I observed their lives, and an overwhelming wave of sadness washed over me. They moved with an unsettling uniformity, their steps deliberate but devoid of vitality. It was as though the marks had drained them of individuality, tethering them to an unseen force that dictated their every move. A deep ache settled in my chest as I thought of how easy it could be for anyone, even my own family, to fall into the same trap. The hollowness in their eyes was haunting, a silent plea for something more, for freedom, for truth, that they themselves seemed unable to recognize. I could see their lives, comfortable, structured, and yet profoundly empty. Their smiles were forced, their laughter hollow, and their steps weighed down by invisible chains. What will happen to them? I asked, afraid of the answer. Jesus' expression softened, but his eyes carried a sadness I couldn't bear. Unless they turn from the deception, they will remain bound, unable to see the truth. I lowered my head, overwhelmed. How can I help them? What could I possibly do to make a difference? You carry the truth now, Laura, he said gently. And truth, when shared, has the power to break chains. You are not alone in this journey. You must trust that what you say and do will plant seeds, even if you cannot see them grow. I looked up at him, his face radiant and filled with an unwavering love. But what if I fail? There is no failure in truth, he replied. His words washed over me like a gentle wave, soothing yet unearthing an ache buried deep within. For a moment, I stood frozen, grappling with the weight of what he had said. Failure had always felt like a shadow, lurking in every decision, every missed opportunity. But here, in his presence, failure seemed to lose its power. My chest tightened, and tears welled in my eyes as I whispered, "But what if I'm not enough?" Jesus met my gaze, his voice tender yet unyielding. You are enough, Laura, because truth itself is enough. Trust that it will do its work. Only the courage to speak it and live by it. The light around us began to change again, dimming slightly as the vision faded. I felt the ground beneath me shift, as if we were being moved, though my feet never left the rise. Jesus turned to me. his expression still serious but laced with reassurance. "There is one more thing you must understand," he said. "The mark is not just a symbol. It is a choice. Every soul must decide what they value most, truth or the comfort of deception. That decision shapes the path they walk." I nodded slowly, his words sinking deep into my heart. The vision had ended, but its weight remained. I knew this was only the beginning of what I had to carry back, a truth that would forever alter how I saw the world. And yet, as the light began to envelop us again, I felt an unshakable sense of purpose. Whatever lay ahead, I knew I would not face it alone. As the light enveloped us, the air seemed to hum with an intensity I hadn't felt before. Every step I took with Jesus felt heavier, more deliberate, as though the weight of the truths he had shown me anchored my soul. The luminous field faded, replaced by a swirling tapestry of stars and colors that seemed to stretch infinitely. The very fabric of this place felt alive, vibrating with energy and possibility. Jesus slowed his pace and turned to me, his eyes filled with a depth that seemed to pierce through every layer of my being. "Laura, you have seen much, but there is one final truth you must confront." My heart raced, a mixture of fear and anticipation rising within me. "What is it?" I whispered, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. He gestured to the space before us, and once again, the scene shifted. This time, I saw my family. Tom was sitting in the hospital waiting room, his head buried in his hands. Emma was at her desk, her textbook open but forgotten, as she stared blankly at the pages. Jake, still on the soccer field, kicked the ball absent-mindedly, his laughter quieter than before. The sight of them filled me with a pang of longing so sharp it nearly brought me to my knees. "They are waiting for you," Jesus said, his voice gentle but firm. "But their journey does not depend on your presence alone. Each of them will face their own choices, their own encounters with truth." Tears streamed down my face as I watched them, my love for them swelling to a point that it felt like it might burst. "I don't know how to help them," I admitted. "How do I bring this truth to them? How do I ensure they don't fall into the same trap I did, letting faith fade into the background?" Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch both grounding and electrifying. "Laura, the truth is not yours to control. It is yours to live. Your family will see the change in you, and through that, they will be drawn to their own journeys. Faith cannot be forced, but it can be inspired." I nodded, though the weight of responsibility still pressed heavily on me. But what if it's too late for them? What if they've already made choices they can't undo? "There is no path too far from redemption," Jesus said. "Every soul has the opportunity to turn toward truth, no matter how far they have strayed. But the choice must be theirs." As he spoke, the vision of my family faded, replaced by a vast expanse of light that seemed to stretch endlessly. Within the light, I saw countless figures, people from every corner of the world. Some walked confidently toward the light, their faces serene and filled with purpose. Others hesitated, their steps faltering as they glanced back toward the shadows behind them. "Do you see them?" Jesus asked, his gaze fixed on the scene before us. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "They're all searching for something." "They are searching for truth," he said. "But not all of them recognize it when they see it. Some will cling to the shadows because it feels familiar, safe. Others will step into the light, even when it means leaving behind everything they thought they knew." I watched as a young woman stepped forward, her face illuminated as she moved closer to the light. Behind her, a man reached out, his expression filled with desperation. As he tried to pull her back, she hesitated for a moment, looking at him with sorrow, before continuing her journey. "It's so hard," I said, my heart aching for her, "to leave behind what you know, even if it's hurting you." "It is," Jesus agreed, "but the light calls to every soul. Some will hear it clearly, while others will need help recognizing its voice." I turned to him, a question burning in my mind. "What about the mark? Can those who bear it ever be free of it?" "The mark is not permanent," he said, his voice steady. "It is a choice, and choices can be undone. But turning away from deception requires courage and a willingness to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be." As he spoke, the scene shifted again. I saw a man kneeling in the shadows, his hands clutching his marked forehead as tears streamed down his face. Around him, the shadows seemed to flicker as though they were losing their grip. Slowly, he rose to his feet and took a step toward the light. With each step, the mark on his forehead faded until it was gone entirely. Tears filled my eyes as I watched. "He made it," I whispered, a sense of hope blooming in my chest. "He did," Jesus said, "because he chose to. That is the power of truth. It breaks chains, but only when the soul is ready to be free." I closed my eyes, the weight of everything I had seen pressing down on me. When I opened them again, the light around us had dimmed slightly, and Jesus was looking at me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "Laura," he said, "you have been given this vision not to carry the burden of the world, but to be a beacon within it. Live the truth you have seen, and trust that it will ripple outward in ways you cannot yet imagine." I nodded, a sense of purpose settling over me. "I'll try," I said. "I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'll try." "That is all I ask," he said, his voice filled with a love so profound it brought me to tears once more. As the light began to envelop us again, I felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever lay ahead, I knew I would not face it alone. And in that moment, I understood that the journey was not about perfection, but about faith. The faith to keep moving forward, even when the path was unclear. I opened my mouth to thank Jesus, to express the gratitude that welled up within me, but before I could utter a single word, the vision began to fade. The colors dimmed, the warmth of his presence ebbed, and I was left with a bittersweet ache as the world around me dissolved into a soft, muted glow. Before I fully awoke, his words echoed softly, like a melody lingering after the final note. "Remember, Laura, I will always be with you." The hum of the air quieted, and I felt the ground beneath me shift, as though I was being gently pulled away from this place. A faint warmth pressed against my skin, and I realized with a pang of bittersweet clarity I was beginning to wake up, returning to the reality I had momentarily left behind. As my eyes fluttered open, the sterile white of the hospital room replaced the vibrant hues of the heavenly realm I had just left. For a moment, I felt disoriented, as if I were caught between two worlds. Then, I heard a voice I knew well. "Laura?" I turned my head, and there he was, Tom. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with red, and the tension in his body was palpable. He leaned forward, gripping my hand tightly as though afraid to let go. "Tom," I managed to whisper, my voice weak but steady. "I'm here." Relief washed over his face, and he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. "I thought I lost you," he said, his voice cracking. "The doctor said you were gone for over 7 minutes. 7 minutes, Laura!" Tears filled my eyes as I squeezed his hand. "I know, but I came back. And Tom, I need to tell you what I saw." He blinked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What did you see?" "Yes," I said, my voice growing firmer. I saw Jesus. He showed me things about the world, about us, about faith. Tom sat back slightly, his hand still clutching mine. You saw Jesus? I nodded and told Tom everything about seeing Jesus, the visions of truth, and the importance of faith. As I spoke, his expression shifted from confusion to understanding, and by the time I finished, he looked at me with a glimmer of belief in his eyes. I don't know what happened to you, Laura, but I believe you, he said, gripping my hand tightly. Gratitude overwhelmed me as I whispered, Thank you, Tom. That means everything to me. In the days that followed, as I recovered, I found myself looking at the world with new eyes. Every moment felt precious, every interaction laced with purpose. I shared my experience with Emma and Jake, who listened with wide eyes and open hearts. They didn't fully understand, but I could see the seeds being planted, just as Jesus had said. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I would live the truth I had seen, trusting that it would ripple outward in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The message I carry now is simple, yet profound. Truth has the power to break even the strongest chains of deception. In those moments of my near-death experience, Jesus showed me that faith is not about perfection, but about persistence. It's about choosing light over darkness, even when the latter seems easier. I've come to understand that the mark of deception is not just a symbol. It's a reflection of choices driven by fear, complacency, or a longing for control. But these choices can be unmade. Through love, compassion, and truth, I believe we can help others see the light and find their way back to freedom. Every day, I remind myself of his words, "You are enough because truth is enough." Those words fuel my journey as I strive to inspire my family and others to walk a path of faith, no matter how difficult. The truth has become my compass, and I hope it will guide others to discover the same boundless love and peace that I encountered.